This is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a tale of secrets, betrayal, and the kind of desire that burns so hot it can destroy lives. Once you step into her world, there is no turning back. From the outside, Amaka's life looked perfect. She had the house in Lekki with high walls and flowering hibiscus at the gate. She had a husband, Chiki, a man who was steady and hardworking, the kind of man other women said was a good catch. Every Sunday, they dressed in their best clothes and sat in the front pew of church, smiling at the pastor's words. But what no one knew, what no one could even suspect, was that behind those closed doors, Amaka's heart was slowly suffocating. Chiki provided, yes, but love with him was routine, almost mechanical. Their marriage was orderly, polite, but passionless. Nights together often ended with him snoring beside her while she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all life had for her. And then Nonso arrived. He was Chike's younger brother, freshly out of university, restless and searching for work in Lagos. Chiki had offered him a place to stay just for a few weeks. When he walked into their home with his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, Amaka noticed immediately how different he was from his brother. Nonso was younger, taller, with that careless charm of someone who had not yet been tamed by life. He smiled easily, laughed loudly, and carried himself with the energy of a man who believed the world owed him something. At first, Amaka thought nothing of it. She was simply being a good wife, making sure her husband's brother felt welcome. She cooked extra portions, showed him where to find towels, asked about his job applications. Innocent things. But innocence has a way of blurring at the edges when loneliness is involved. The first time it happened, it was late at night. Chika had traveled to Abuja for work, leaving Amaka and Nonso alone in the house. She couldn't sleep, so she went downstairs for a glass of water. To her surprise, the TV was on in the living room, casting soft blue light against the walls. Nonso was there, sprawled on the couch in just a t-shirt and joggers, watching some late-night comedy show. "You're awake?" he asked, sitting up. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Same here," he grinned. "Come, sit. Maybe we'll bore each other into sleep." She laughed despite herself and sank into the couch beside him. They talked, about little things at first. His job hunt, Lagos traffic, the ridiculous price of suya. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the conversation deepened. He asked about her dreams, her regrets, things Chiki had never thought to ask. And for the first time in years, she felt seen. That night ended with nothing more than laughter and a lingering look. But something dangerous had already been set in motion. The next few nights blurred into the same pattern. Late-night talks that became more intimate. Shoulders brushing, knees touching. One night when she stood to leave, his hand brushed against hers, and she didn't pull away. The silence between them grew heavy, electric. And before she could think, his lips were on hers, soft, insistent, forbidden. She should have stopped. She knew it. But the kiss awakened something in her, something she thought was long dead. Her body trembled as she pulled away, breathless, heart racing. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know," he replied, his voice low. "But it feels real." That night, she lay awake in her bed, every nerve in her body alive. Her husband's side of the bed was empty, cold, and she hated herself for wishing it would stay that way. The affair didn't begin with fire and fury. It began with stolen moments. His hand brushing her arm in the kitchen, his eyes holding hers too long across the dinner table. A secret language blossomed between them, one her husband was too blind to notice. Amaka knew she was standing on the edge of a cliff. She knew one wrong step could destroy her marriage, her reputation, her life. But when she thought of Nonso, of the way he made her laugh, of the heat in his eyes when he looked at her, she felt alive in ways Cheeky had never made her feel. And so, when the night finally came that their kisses didn't stop at lips, when his hands traced the curves of her body with hunger and urgency, she didn't resist. She surrendered to him, to desire, to the fire she had been starving for. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets of the guest bedroom, guilt clawed at her chest. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "Living," Nonso murmured, pressing his forehead against hers. And in that moment, Amaka realized she had crossed a line she could never uncross. The danger wasn't just that she had betrayed her husband. The danger was that she didn't regret it. By dawn, the house looked the same. Cheek would return in a few days, and life would continue as though nothing had happened. But Amaka knew the truth. A secret had been born in that house, one that would grow, one that would demand more. And secrets have a way of burning everything around them. The morning after it first happened, Amaka moved through the house like a ghost. The clatter of pots in the kitchen, the hum of the blender, even the sound of Nonso's laughter drifting from the living room, all of it felt too sharp, too loud. She avoided his eyes, afraid that one glance would give them away. But secrets, once planted, grow roots fast. By the time Cheeky returned from his trip, the house had already changed. He didn't notice, of course. Cheek rarely noticed. He dropped his suitcase by the door, kissed his wife absently on the cheek, and immediately started talking about his meetings in Abuja. Nonso came downstairs and embraced his brother warmly, masking any trace of guilt with the ease of youth. Amaka watched them together, her stomach twisting. She had betrayed one for the other, and yet, when Nonso's hand brushed hers as he handed her a plate later that night, a spark shot up her arm. The guilt didn't stop her heart from racing. It only made it worse. The days became unbearable. At night, she lay beside her husband, his steady breathing filling the room, and her body ached with memory. She could still feel Nonso's lips, still hear his voice whispering in the dark. She told herself it had been a mistake, that it could never happen again. But every time she passed him in the hallway, every time their eyes locked, across the dinner table, the air between them pulsed with unspoken hunger. It wasn't long before never again became a lie. One afternoon, when Cheeky left for a work meeting, Amaka found herself in the kitchen, nervously wiping down a spotless counter. Nonso entered, shirtless from a workout, sweat glistening across his chest. She froze. "You're cleaning something that's already clean," he teased, leaning against the doorway. I just needed to keep busy," she stammered, avoiding his eyes. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You've been avoiding me." "Because this is wrong," she whispered. His hand tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "But you want it as much as I do." Her silence was all the answer he needed. Their lips crashed together, desperate, hungry, as though the days of restraint had only fueled the fire. This time, it wasn't just stolen kisses. It was reckless, wild, unstoppable. From that moment, the affair became an addiction. They found ways to steal time. Hurried touches in the corridor when Cheeky was in another room. Breathless kisses in the laundry area. Secret rendezvous in the guest bedroom when Cheeky left for work. Every encounter pulled her deeper into a world she couldn't escape. She hated herself for it. She prayed for strength at night, begged God to take the temptation away. But the very next day, she would find herself back in his arms. The danger only heightened the desire. The possibility of being caught made every touch electric. Amaka began to live two lives: the dutiful wife, cooking meals, and smiling beside her husband at church, and the secret lover, trembling under Nonso's hands behind closed doors. Nonso, too, changed. He was no longer just the carefree younger brother looking for work. With Amaka, he was confident, possessive, and insatiable. He whispered things to her that made her blush, things her husband had never dared to say. He made her laugh, made her feel young again. But beneath it all, Amaka sensed something dangerous, a streak of recklessness that matched her own weakness. One evening, while Chiki was working late, they lay tangled together, the sheets damp with sweat. Amaka's chest rose and fell rapidly as she stared at the ceiling, guilt gnawing at her. "This can't go on," she murmured. Nonso propped himself up on one elbow, studying her. "Then stop me." She turned to him, her voice breaking. "I can't." And that was the truth. It wasn't just lust anymore. It was dependency. She needed him, the thrill, the escape, the way he made her feel alive. Without him, her world would sink back into silence and routine. But with every secret meeting, the walls closed in tighter. Cheek wasn't a fool forever. One night, over dinner, he glanced between his wife and his brother and frowned. "You two seem closer these days," he said casually, spooning rice onto his plate. Amaka's fork froze midair. "He's family," she replied quickly. Nonso grinned. "Don't worry, big bro, I'm not stealing your wife. She just listens to my job frustrations more than you do." Chike chuckled, satisfied with the joke. But Amaka's heart hammered in her chest. How long before the truth slipped out? How long before someone noticed the way her eyes lingered too long on Nonso's face, or the way he unconsciously leaned toward her? The addiction was no longer a private sin. It was a ticking time bomb. One Sunday after church, as they sat in the car waiting for Chike to finish greeting, "Friends," Nonso leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "Let's run away," he whispered. Her stomach flipped. "Don't joke like that. I'm serious. Forget this life. Forget him. You know you want me." For a moment, Amaka imagined it, leaving everything behind, starting fresh with a man who made her feel alive. But reality snapped back. She had a husband, a reputation, a home. People would call her names: husband snatcher, destroyer, Jezebel. "We can't," she said firmly, forcing her voice to steady. "We'll ruin everything." Nonso pulled back, his jaw tight. "Maybe it's already ruined." That night, Amaka cried quietly into her pillow while Cheek snored beside her, oblivious. The man she had vowed to love and honor had no idea his younger brother's scent still lingered on her skin. The addiction had consumed her, and she no longer knew how to stop. The stakes are higher. Amaka and Nonso are reckless. Cheeky is starting to notice small things, and Amaka herself is torn between the thrill of passion and the crushing weight of guilt. Amaka always thought she was careful. She planned every stolen moment with precision. The quick touches in the hallway, the whispered promises when Cheeky wasn't home. But secrets are greedy things. They demand more. And eventually, they spill into the open. It began with little mistakes. One morning, Cheeky picked up a shirt from the laundry basket and frowned. "This isn't mine," he said, holding it up. Amaka froze. It was Nonso's t-shirt, forgotten in the wrong pile. She forced a smile. It must have gotten mixed in. You know boys, they throw clothes everywhere." Cheeky shrugged, unconvinced, but said nothing more. Still, his eyes lingered a little longer than usual. Another evening he returned home earlier than expected. Amaka and Nonso were in the kitchen, laughing over a private joke, their shoulders too close. Chike stood in the doorway, watching them, something hard flickering in his gaze. "What's so funny?" he asked, his tone sharper than usual. Amaka's laughter died instantly. "Nothing, just teasing him about his cooking skills." Nonso grinned, playing it cool, but Cheek didn't smile back. That night, as they lay in bed, Cheek turned to her. "You and Nonso, you talk a lot." "He's your brother," she said quickly, her voice too defensive. "Should I ignore him?" Cheeky studied her for a long moment. "No, just be careful. He's young, reckless. I don't want him dragging you into his nonsense." His words cut deep. If only he knew the truth, that she wasn't being dragged, she was diving headfirst. The cracks widened with each passing week. Amaka could feel Cheek's suspicion growing, though he never voiced it outright. He started watching her more closely, asking where she'd been, what she was doing. He checked in unexpectedly, during the day, as though trying to catch something out of place. For Amaka, every knock on the door, every ring of Cheek's phone, sent her heart racing with fear. Yet, even with the walls closing in, she couldn't stop. The addiction had her in chains. One rainy afternoon, with thunder rumbling in the distance, she and Nonso found themselves alone again. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her chest. She should have stayed away, kept to her room, prayed until the temptation passed. Instead, she found herself in the guest room, her breath mingling with his, their bodies tangled in forbidden heat. But this time, in the middle of it, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Panic surged. She shoved Nonso off, scrambling to pull herself together. Cheek's voice echoed down the hall. "Amaka, you here?" Her heart nearly stopped. She straightened her dress, smoothed her hair, and stepped out just as her husband turned the corner. "There you are," he said, eyes narrowing. "What were you doing in there?" "Looking for a towel," she lied, forcing a calm smile. "The rain brought in water through the window." Cheek's gaze swept over her, lingering too long. He said nothing, but she saw the doubt etched in his expression. For the first time, Amaka felt the ground under her feet shift. The secret was no longer safe. That night, when Nonso wasn't around, Chike sat at the edge of their bed. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. Her stomach clenched. "About what?" "About you and my brother." The room fell silent, heavy, suffocating. Her pulse roared in her ears. "There's nothing to tell," she whispered, her throat dry. Cheek's jaw tightened. He didn't believe her, but he didn't press further. Instead, he lay back, turning away, leaving her with a silence louder than any accusation. For the first time, Amaka realized what betrayal truly felt like. Not just the act of breaking vows, but the crushing weight of knowing she had wounded a man who trusted her. Yet even then, she couldn't stop. Nonso grew bolder. Perhaps it was youth, perhaps arrogance, but he no longer hid his desire as carefully. He lingered too long in the kitchen when Amaka cooked. He teased her openly in front of Cheeky, his eyes carrying meanings only the two of them understood. "Be careful," she hissed at him one night when Cheeky was in the shower. "You worry too much," he whispered, brushing her hand. "He'll never know." But Amaka wasn't so sure anymore. She could feel the tension thickening in the air, like storm clouds gathering. One evening, Cheeky confronted his brother directly. Amaka overheard their voices from upstairs. "You've been disrespectful," Cheek said, his tone stern. Nanso laughed. How? You stay out late, you waste your time, and you think you can behave however you like under my roof. Don't forget whose house this is. Amaka's heart pounded as she listened. She feared Chiki would say more, that the truth would spill out right there. But Nanso only muttered something about being a man in his own right, and the argument fizzled into silence. Still, the walls were closing in. Amaka began to notice changes in her husband. He was quieter, colder, his eyes shadowed with doubt. He no longer reached for her in bed. He stayed longer at work, and when he was home, the warmth between them had all but disappeared. And in those silences, the betrayal cut deeper. She had wanted passion, excitement, life. Instead, she had sown suspicion, distance, and cracks that threatened to shatter everything. One night, unable to sleep, Amaka crept downstairs for water. She found Chiki sitting alone in the dark, a glass of whiskey in his hand. You think I don't see it? He said quietly, without looking at her. Her throat closed. See what? The way he looks at you. The way you laugh at his jokes. The way you avoid my eyes. Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to confess, to throw herself at his feet and beg forgiveness, but fear sealed her lips. Chike, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. He finally looked at her, his gaze heavy with sorrow. I hope not, he said, because if it is, you'll destroy us. And with that, he stood and left her in the darkness, the cracks now wide enough for her to fall through. Amaka returned to bed that night, her chest heavy, her mind racing. The man she had married was slipping away, and yet she couldn't let go of the man who made her feel alive. She was torn in two, bleeding on both sides. The betrayal was no longer a secret. It was a shadow, creeping into every corner of their home, threatening to consume them all. And deep down, Amaka knew. The storm had only just begun. The walls of Amaka's home no longer felt like walls. They felt like prison bars. Every sound was a threat. Every glance from her husband a dagger of suspicion. The laughter and warmth that once filled their house had been replaced with silence thick enough to choke on. For weeks, she tried to hold the pieces together. She smiled when Chika looked her way. She cooked his favorite meals, wore the dresses he liked, even reached for his hand during church. But nothing could erase the distance in his eyes. He was there, but no longer with her. And Nanso? He grew reckless. Why are we still hiding? He asked one night, his voice low and insistent as they stood in the shadows of the laundry room. He already suspects. Let's stop pretending. Amaka shook her head furiously. Don't say that. Do you want to ruin me? You're already ruined, he whispered, pressing close. At least be ruined for me. Her chest ached. She wanted him. God help her, she wanted him. But the weight of her husband's sorrow hung over her like a curse. She was trapped between two men, one who gave her stability, the other who gave her fire. And in the end, fire always burns. It happened on a Friday evening. The rain poured hard against the windows, thunder rattling the house. Chiki had come home early, his shirt damp, his mood darker than the storm outside. He barely spoke through dinner, pushing his food around his plate while Amaka and Nanso exchanged anxious glances. Afterward, Amaka cleared the table while Chiki disappeared into his study. Nanso lingered in the kitchen, his hand brushing hers as she reached for a plate. The touch was quick, almost nothing, but it was enough. A sharp voice cut through the room. I knew it. Amaka froze, the plate slipping from her hand and shattering against the floor. She turned slowly. Cheeky stood in the doorway, his face carved with rage and heartbreak. "You think I'm blind?" he thundered, his voice cracking. "In my own house? With my own brother? Chike, please." Amaka's voice broke, her knees trembling. But Nonso stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Don't shout at her." The room went still. For the first time, the secret was no longer in the shadows. It was alive, breathing, tearing them apart in the open. Cheek's fists curled. "You dare speak to me? After everything I've done for you? You repay me by stealing my wife?" "She's not a possession," Nonso shot back. "She deserves more than a cold bed and a man who doesn't even see her." The words sliced deeper than any blade. Amaka felt her soul split as she looked between them. The man she had promised her life to, and the man who made her feel alive. Tears blurred her vision. "Stop, both of you," she begged, clutching her chest. This was never supposed to happen. But it had. And there was no undoing it. The night unraveled into chaos. Voices rose, accusations flew. Cheek hurled every insult he could find, his heart breaking with every word. Nonso stood his ground, defiant, unapologetic. "You betrayed me," Cheek finally whispered, his voice hollow. He wasn't just talking to his brother. He was talking to her. Amaka crumpled to her knees, sobs shaking her body. "I'm sorry," she whispered again and again, but apologies are weak currency when trust has already been shattered. Cheek turned to his brother, his eyes blazing. "Get out of my house, tonight." Nonso hesitated, his gaze flicking to Amaka. For a moment, it looked like he might refuse, might challenge his brother for her right then and there. But something in Cheek's face, the raw betrayal, the fury barely contained, stopped him. Without another word, Nonso stormed out into the rain, the front door slamming shut behind him. The echo of it rattled through Amaka's bones. That night, silence settled over the house like ash after a fire. Cheeky slept in the study, leaving Amaka alone in their bed. She curled against the sheets, her body racked with sobs, her mind replaying every choice that had led here. She had wanted passion. She had wanted to feel alive. But now she was surrounded by ruins, her marriage fractured, her lover gone, her heart split in two. In the morning, Cheeky emerged with packed bags. "I need time," he said flatly. His voice carried no anger now, only emptiness. "Don't call me. Don't follow me. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." Amaka reached for him, her fingers trembling. "Please." But he stepped back, his eyes hard. "You killed us, Amaka, and you did it with my own blood." And with that, he walked out, leaving her standing in the doorway, the sound of his departure ringing louder than thunder. Days turned into weeks. Nonso never returned. Cheeky never called. The house felt hollow, every room echoing with ghosts of laughter and whispers now gone. Amaka lived in a silence of her own making, haunted by the weight of her choices. Sometimes at night, she swore she could still feel Nonso's touch, still hear his voice whispering her name. Other times, she dreamed of Cheek's eyes, eyes that once held love but now burned with betrayal. She had lost them both, and as she sat alone at the dining table, staring at two empty chairs, she finally understood the cruel truth. Passion may set your heart on fire, but fire does not build. It destroys. The end.